Cool. Hey guys, thanks for joining me. I suppose right now there should be music playing in the background. I can see it there playing, and I'm dancing. I cannot hear the music though, so I'm just dancing, pretending the music is there. But let me turn off the music. And hi! Let me also press out the live feed. Okay, cool. So, hi, thanks for joining me. Let me see if just open all the different windows here. And we have some people here. Thanks for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. And let me just share this on Twitter real quick. Yeah, I'm live tweeting here. And there you go, live. There you go. Okay, cool. So, okay, guys, so on this session, we're going to talk a little bit about how to work with engineers. As a designer, how to work with engineers. And I have some pointers here. I would love for you to put some of your questions here. And why am I even doing this? Why will this be important? The thing is that I got this question a lot. I do some workshops, and I also I mentor some designers. And actually yesterday, a mentee asked me this. So she was like, "Hey, you know what? It would be great to know how do you collaborate and work with engineers? What is your process? Do you have any tips?" And she's a young designer. So I was I started thinking about it. I was like, okay, well, I do this and that. And she suggested, you know what, this is something that other designers, I'm pretty sure they will be interested to know, or at least have an insight into your process. So I said, okay, cool. You know what? I'm going to do a live stream. And that's why we're here. So thanks for joining me. I'm seeing everyone from San Jose, France, from San Diego, London. That's super awesome. And so I have some notes here, but ask your questions on the chat, and I can probably go through them. And because every designer will probably have a different situation. Probably you have a small team or a large team, and probably the collaboration process could be a little bit different. But I think the basic principles will be the same, right? Whereas the first thing that I think you will want to do is understand engineers. And I think understanding engineers will help you how to talk to them. And it's not like they're like a mystical thing that you have to understand. They're not. And also they're not robots. They're just like people, and they have they just they're just like our engineers. That's all. That's what they study. And they have they don't. It's not like they lack empathy as that you as a designer will have. So let's talk about what engineer does. And an engineer, first of all, it's not just someone that you just dump work to and just they will do their thing. It's they are actually the people that bring things to life. They make your crazy ideas. They're going to make them real, and usually they make them real, and they're forced to think about your ideas and your designs in a more analytical way, and with a technical perspective, and they have sometimes I feel like it's there's a separation between the designer and the engineer, and they're like, oh, so different. But I think I don't think so. A lot of the things are just people that just have a different career, and also they at the end they have different knowledge that will help you and your product and your team to create something amazing. So I think understanding that they are the people that will make things real. You have to also understand what is feasible, what can be real and what cannot. So there's always this dilemma or this question of should designers also code? And I don't know, it depends, but I think that as designers we should know at least the basics. And the basics, I think the basics of front end for sure, and we need to know at least the basics of a product, of how it should work, the platform or the different devices that it will work, and obviously know it from the design perspective on all the design patterns you will need to do on web patterns, if it's mobile patterns, if it's for iOS or for Android. Those are the things that basic you as a designer need to know. But I think understanding a little bit of how the code works will help you, empower you to know what of your ideas will seem a little bit more feasible, more real, and that the engineer will even be more excited to work on. And and I'm not saying that you need to know all the answers. I'm just saying it's just the basic, and obviously you can relay on your engineer to know what is the technology, the how the technology can solve your problem. So I think it's always good to know a little bit. And I think the main thing, the key through all of this, and it's not just with engineers, it's communication. Communication. And I know it sounds cliche, and I know it sounds like obvious, right? But I think we sometimes just forget that. We just forget that they're just like that we have sometimes to get out of our shell, of our comfort zone, and go out there and actually talk to people, and talk to people with the product manager or with different stakeholders. But also, I think it's very important to include engineers from the beginning, from the planning, from the ideation, and every step of the way. Not I think you don't want to overwhelm your engineer with just like talking to them all the day, right? And it's just like with all your insecurities and stuff. But you want to get their feedback in a lot of things, right? Because they are the ones that will make your ideas real, and they will have usually like great feedback, or even probably even a better idea than you. So I think one thing it's just that you have to understand that creativity is not exclusive to designers. I'm sorry, guys. We're not just a special snowflakes. You will get engineers that are really creative, and that they have this problem-solving mind that will probably empower you too. And the idea of having communicating with an engineer from the beginning about the problem, about the project, about like when is it going to be, like how long is it going to take. I think it just like helps them understand what the problem is, and also like how they can solve it once it's in their hands. And and I'm going to go through the questions in a minute. I'm going to continue here. And thank you for the questions, by the way. I've seen a lot of this stuff, and it's pretty good. And I think uh, the thing about communication is just that when a project starts, you don't know everything. You have an idea, and you have an idea of what the product is, and you have an idea of the time of how it's going to take. But things change, and more in like tech products. Sorry, in products, the product roadmap, it's a little bit messy. And I think engineers appreciate when they're involved in this process, and they know of the changes how did you get to that solution, you know? So it's always good to include them, and so because they have context to know how to make decisions too. And one like tactical thing of how to communicate is sometimes obviously probably a product will have an initial like meeting or a brief where everyone will understand what the goals of the project are. So it's great to include them there. And usually product managers will include them there. But if you are working on a team that doesn't have a product manager, and you're probably working directly with the CEO or someone else, it's good to just like, hey, let's include some engineers or whoever is going to be responsible for this in the team, and this to know, or at least so they know what the project is, and get their feedback. So I think I'm looking at some of my notes, and I think one of the things throughout the process that you want to have is don't be afraid to have a debate with your engineer, where they will probably not agree with a lot of the things that you are giving out. So not to always be in the defensive on your design. Try to listen to other people, and it's not just exclusive to engineers; it's to any other stakeholder, right? You want to listen to them and bring that your superpower, which is empathy, right? And understand where they're coming from, and try to. Obviously, it's also your responsibility to know what feedback is good and what feedback is not important. So try to understand that from the engineering perspective, what you can apply and what you need not to apply. So again, don't be afraid to have a debate and just like talk through your ideas and get a little bit more to know what they think. So yes, cool. So I'm looking at the questions. Before I continue, let me see if I can see a question that I can answer. Uh, yes, thank you for my hairstyle. I love it. It's getting kind of hot with the light and everything. I'm going to take it away. Take it off. Sorry. Okay, cool. Let me see how I look. Okay, hair is okay. Yeah, so let me see another question here. What advice can you give for being the sole designer surrounded by these engineers? So I think it's like having different tactics depending on your team. It's Yeah, there are different ways. I'll go a little bit more about. I will talk about a little bit more about it later. Let me see if I have another question. How crap about any question for our initial conversation? Take a question. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm saying thank you, and oh my God, your new hair. Okay, cool. Anyway, let me continue. I think we talked about a little bit about the feedback and the communication is key. I think it's very important to understand their opinions and just get rid of your ego and learn when their advice is good. Like learn get rid of the ego every time you're going to talk with just like not just the engineers, anyone, right? Um, and understand that usually where they're coming from with their ideas, and usually they will make your think about how they can make your design or your solution even better. Like if they're going to make it faster, they're going to make it snappy, they're going to make it like look awesome. So it's always good to make them feel like they own the project too, and they own your solution. So a tip is make. I took this tip from Julie Zhuo from Facebook, which is make their lives easy. And I think I started talking to some engineers this morning. I was like, oh, you know what? I'm going to talk with some engineers and see what they think. And I got some feedback on this, and I think it makes sense. Whereas and it's part of the design process, right? Whereas they really love when a designer like shows a lot of prototypes, and they show the prototype, they show something that is working, and it just like it really helps them understand like the problem. And then usually they are the ones that to see all the corner what do you say, corner states. Anyway, corner whatever. Where the things that you didn't think about, they will be the ones that usually like before the implementation, they will know all those different things, all those different paths that the user might take. So it's usually good for them to have a prototype where they can click, where you can show them like the flow of the user, and then they get a better understanding of your solution. So having a prototype is really useful, and something that they loved also, just like I said, early feedback. And I an engineer mentioned to me today that they really like to have a design guideline, but it depends again on what kind of team it is. Whereas sometimes in the beginning of a product, probably a startup, a small startup, sometimes a lot of things change. So having a design guideline, like a brief design guideline is good, but also everybody has to understand that those whatever those patterns you're using or those styles that you're using might change. So I think that was one of the feedbacks too that I got. It's just like whenever there's a bigger company and there are multiple designers that are working, there's a team of multiple designers and multiple engineers, you want to have consistency, right? So it's really annoying for them to get get a design from one designer that it looks totally different from a different designer, which I mean, that will be annoying for anyone, right? You don't want to like the branding team. I'm pretty sure will be very annoyed if you're using a different style that is not on the style guide, and you're just like making the life of an engineer a little bit harder because they want to be able to reuse some of the elements they have already made, and they don't want their CSS style sheet to grow bigger and bigger because that hurts performance. So I think it's just a, but at the same time, depending on your team and depending on or how you work, they understand how in some situations, in some contexts, like some things change, and more in the product world, things change, and so it's. But again, it's good to communicate when if you're toying with an idea, if something is like you're still working on it, it's good to communicate this with your engineer where it's like, hey, probably this solution will change. Probably this is not the final one. You don't want your engineer to later be like, holy shit, all this crap that I just worked on is not going to be implemented because they will be very nitty gritty. They will go into the detail about like how to put their code like where it's understandable and it's just easy to read and it goes with all the guidelines and all compliances and then suddenly you tell them like, oh, you know what, that solution, no, we're not doing that anymore, and so they will probably hate you for that. So try to avoid that, and sometimes having a style guide will help you with that. So something that I Gabriel Valvidia from Facebook. He's from the design team on Facebook on VR. I asked him, so is there something you that has worked for you? And he recommended obviously, and I think again, it's not only for engineers, but I think it's great to do this with them. Whereas empower your engineers or explain to them where there's not all a magic trick. That it's not just all your decisions are not just things that came from intuition or from your creative mind that sometimes is a little bit like mystic mind. It's like no, like you have to always explain your design process. How do you get there? Why did you make that choice? What were the different solutions that you tried, and why didn't you want to put them in the final design? So it's always good to like, is it research? Is it that you talk to different stakeholders? You talk to different users? What are the things again that you try? And I think it's demystifying your solutions, demystifying design. It just like helps everyone and not just engineers. So again, communication. I think it goes back to the communication, right? And I think another thing that I really liked from Gabriel that he said, he has obviously Facebook. You can imagine is a huge team. So something that he does like a class, like a like a like a workshop where he teaches design to engineers. Well, to different parts of the team, but engineers appreciate it too. And it's more of an exercise, and it's like for 3 hours where people understand more of design thinking and how to have a creative mind and how to approach problems with a creative mind. And so I think that was really interesting, and it makes sense where it's just you empower your engineers with design thinking, and also not only that, but he teaches some of the tools that we designers use, and that way they feel also empowered to open the files and see all the details. Like why wouldn't an engineer be able to open a a sketch file and see like how exactly you got to that solution and what were those little things that you made. So I think that was great. So if you have the time, or if you think that's necessary, I think I will recommend you also applying that. Let me see. Yes, so something that Victor Ciara is saying, like, hey, you keep the engineering team in the same circle when you're brainstorming and sketching. So in the ideation process, it's always good to have the people that are going to be involved in that project, right? And sometimes we forget to invite the engineers. Don't forget. It's just like I don't know. just don't forget. You're just like they are going to be the ones that are going to implement it. So you don't want them to just like suddenly open a Zeppelin file and it's like, so what does this do? Why are we doing that? You don't want to have that question suddenly at the end when things are supposed to be implemented. You don't want your engineer to ask those questions. You want to ask those questions from the beginning, right? Okay, so something that I asked engineers too, what did they hate? And I think it was that or you didn't think about the details. And I don't think, well, I didn't get like that they hate it. It's more like edge cases. That's what I wanted to think. Oh my God. I had a brain fart before. What I wanted to say is that usually engineers will be the ones that think about those edge cases, all those corner states where it's like they know where the user will go. So those details, usually the engineer finds them at the end. So it's before you give them your red line or your Zeppelin file, try to think of those edge cases. And if you don't know them, and you can probably before giving the project to them, you can talk about those. Like, do you see something where the user might take a U-turn or something? You usually see those things. So again, it's a communication, and if you don't want to communicate, at least have it ready. And I think we cover this, but I got someone that told me that says like not knowing what the hell the project is about. So communication again. Um, big companies, the styles are different because okay. So now I'm going to talk about a little bit of the different tools that I use. Oh yeah, clear what you think about details. Yeah, something I forgot to say. Uh, own the final product. Just go into the details in the end and just sit next to them, and sit next to them and see how the implementation is, and just like go around and it's just like, hey, can we move this a little bit? Can we, you know what, this flow doesn't feel as good. We're missing this piece. Just like own the final product, and you and not just you, just like everyone, right? But you be the don't just give it to them and then just like say bye bye. Now it's your problem. You have to be at the end too. It's not your problem is not just like taking the plane up, but also to land it. Is that how you say it? Okay. Anyway, yes. So on the final product, and let me see if I have another documentation. So yeah. So let me talk about like some of the tactics and some of the apps that I use, and I'm going to put some links down there. But again, I think one of the tools that I use is prototyping, and there are many different apps out there, but I see prototyping as one tool, as one tool to communicate with engineers and to tell them the story. So prototyping, and it can be from early stages on just like from one screen to another screen. But if you have micro interactions of different animations and you want something to be very specifically, like an animation to be very specific, it's really good to actually build that prototype, to build that animation. And there are many different tools out there. I recommend for screen-to-screen prototyping, I recommend or InVision, which is I think is the most popular one. I also use Marvel app, and I love Marvel app, and I think it's a great prototyping tool for also for from one screen to another screen, and then we're just like connecting screens. And I also, for animations and micro interactions, I will use a tool called Flinto, and another one called Principle. But there are many tools like that out there. There's Origami Studio from Facebook. There's Framer.js if you want to get more into the code and have more control over it and on the JavaScript. You can use one of those prototyping tools too. So that's for prototyping. Also, I think presentation, it's having a presentation is it's a tool too. Whereas you have not just a prototype, but also like talk about your project. If it's going to be with different stakeholders, or if it's just like a one-on-one, or is it just like going with someone and sitting next to them and just like talking about your solution, having it in a way that is a little bit more presentable, sometimes it helps. So depending on the person and depending on the stage of the project, you might want to have a presentation. It's just like a quick keynote sometimes, or sometimes just a sketch file that has all the different artboards and works as a presentation. You can do that too. I think another tool that I use a lot, and I don't that has helped me. It's just like once I'm using this, I'm never going back. It's Zeplin, and it connects really well if you use a Sketch app for product design or for web or for mobile. Zeplin connects it connects greatly with Sketch, and it outputs your document, your sketch document, with all the different elements, and you can pretty much just like you can share the document, the project with an engineer, and then they can see the distances between elements. They can grab CSS code, or I think they can grab some elements from Objective-C if it's an iOS product, and it's just great because you can even create a style guide inside your Zeplin project, and you can have communication there, where it's like you can add comments, and someone else can add. You can add your own reply and update the screens there, and that way it's always updated. And it's like the final documentation for me has always been Zeplin. Recently, from I've been using it for a year, and it's like amazing. It's great. And if you're thinking about like the payment, I think it's totally worth it. It's totally worth having multiple projects. And there's another one that InVision is putting out there that is called Inspect. I think right now it's only available for enterprise accounts, but I think it might be available for some beta accounts. So that's another one which is pretty similar to Zeplin. Right now it's just on the web. Zeplin has a Mac app too, so that's probably an advantage, and Zeplin has been for a longer time. But if you already have an InVision account, probably it makes sense to use the new Inspect from InVision, because you're already paying for that account. So I will check that one out, and I'll leave links for all this on the description later. And another one that I really like to use is Sketch Measure, and this one gives you. You can select any object. You can select an object and then press a button, and then it gives you the sizes. Like it creates a layer with sizes and distances between elements. It does all the redlining for you, which is, I think it's great. InVision has it built. So Inspect mode is actually apparently it's available for everyone. Someone is telling me here on the comments. So it is available now. Sorry. Yeah, so you use a Craft plugin and you can put it on InVision. And it's pretty similar to Zeplin again. So if you already have an InVision account, you're already paying for that, then it makes sense to use the Inspect one. And again, Sketch Measure. Sometimes having the Inspect or the Zeplin file is not enough, and you actually want to hard code the actual sizes, and you want to put notes, you want to put comments on the actual file, on the actual sketch file, then I would recommend this tool that is called Sketch Measure. And this one is free if you want to do a donation, so that's an advantage too. And you can also export HTML too, so if you want to do that, you can do that too, which is pretty similar to what Inspect and Zeplin do. And something that somebody recommended to me, it's called Droplr. It's DROPLR, and this one pretty much is just like creates a screenshot, and you can add notes to a screenshot. When you want something quick, where it's like you know it's something that something is off, or something that you want to give feedback, just create a screenshot, and then you can add like an arrow and notes and say like, hey, can you change the color of this? And that's it. Now I think just going back and talking about like the different bullet points, I think it's just you have to try to understand engineers and try to understand their way of thinking. Understand. I think it will empower you to understand what is feasible to build, what is and for that probably you need to learn a little bit of how programming works, or at least how front end works. And if you want to get a little bit crazier, then you can learn how GitHub works and actually learn how all the different files that are being implemented, that are being like pushed, you can probably own a part of it. So if you are into actually tinkering with the CSS and all that, it will empower you a lot, and some engineers will appreciate it if you're clean with your code. So if you feel good enough, do it. Communication and communication, we touched a lot of things, but just like it's communication is key, and not just with engineers only, with anyone in the team. So understand your engineers' opinions and try to remove the ego and just like say, okay, cool, yeah, let's try to solve this problem together. And you try to make their lives easy with different tools like prototyping, talking to them, like being detail oriented, and also at the end, sorry, own the final product. Own the final product and be with the product until the end. And well, sometimes it never ends, right? A project will never end because there are always going to be updates. But at least when it's launched, and after the launch, whatever feedback you get and whatever bugs you found or whatever usability problems you found that people were getting lost, own that part. Don't just wash your hands and say goodbye. And okay, cool. So I'm going to go to the here on the questions, and let me see what's going on. And the best thing to keep in your same circle, yes. Communication, what are you doing next? Yes. Perfect red lines always help. Yeah. Inspect mode, yes. What is the future of designers coexistence? What is the future of developers and designers coexistence? I don't know. I don't know what is the future. I don't have a magic bulb. I can say that I think communication between engineers and designers has been just like has been evolving, and it has been way better. I think it now we have tools, and we have learned that number one, that design is really important. That if you want to have a more successful product, you have to, from the beginning, to have design thinking, to include design thinking in your product. So I think it has always been a little bit, or probably thinking in the 90s, or sorry, in the early 2000s, whereas the engineers were the gods and designers were just like kids with crayons, and we probably designers weren't taken very seriously. So I don't think that's how it is right now, and I think that's just only improving, right? And again, I think it's also you as a designer to own your scientific thinking, and like why your decisions are not just based on intuition, and which is, there's nothing wrong with intuition, but it's more like it's also based on data. It's also based on research. It's also based on all the different design principles that and that have been applied for millennials. So it's good to have that mutual respect. So I think that's the future of us. It's just, I wish your shirt said cabron instead of carbon. Yeah. For those that don't know, cabron is like a bad word in Spanish, or at least in Mexico. I don't know where else. But yeah, I wish. Yeah, I'm gonna do one like that. For example, more standardized communication from a. Best app tool, way to look at all the screens of an app at one time if you want to do a complete app redesign. So I think something that I have done previously is I actually include on different projects on Zeplin, I would include one screen which actually shows the full flow. And one screen on Zeplin, they can zoom in and zoom out and can add comments there. But one screen actually, I don't know if you use Sketch, but on Sketch you can put artboards inside artboards. So sometimes I will have a giant artboard, and inside that giant artboard I will put all the different artboards with different arrows and comments, and that way anyone in the team can see the full flow, with arrows and notes and all that stuff, because you have a giant artboard that is the parent of children, artboard children. That's how that's dumb. Okay, so I will put that. I will use that, export that image, and I'll export it as a PNG or export it as a Zeplin screen, and they can actually zoom in, and they're already using Zeplin, so it's good to have it there too. Okay, so I'm going to see if there was a solo designer. This was the first question by Connie Chen. What advice can you give for being the solo designer surrounded by engineers? I think it's a matter again of I think sometimes it's good to, depending on the project, it's good to find that those engineers that think a little bit like you. And no, I don't think that's no. Actually, no communication. That's it. Just I think always explain your design thinking. Always have everyone involved, and it doesn't matter then if it's there are 20 engineers versus one designer, or 2 engineers versus one designer. At the end, it's more about like if you have to present to the whole team, then do a presentation. But if it's usually it's more like certain engineers working in different parts of the project. If it's a big engineering team, so it's good to have those one-on-ones, and have those small teams and just like own those talks, own those meetings, and just like talk about those issues or problems that might occur, and just talk about the problem. So I think there's not a big difference between just like being one engineer versus a ton of engineers. Again, it's not a fight. It's not like you're fighting against them. It's just you just have to know how to present your work, and have to empower engineers to understand your work too. Okay, cool. As always, Paulo, wow. How would you encourage engineers to participate in the design process? I think I talked a little bit about it with what Gabriel recommended from Facebook, which is like get them to understand a little bit more about the importance of the design process before you actually do the design process. So I think that actually helps a lot. Okay, cool. So I think I'm going to. Oh, there's another question. Also, any suggestion for what initial conversations to have? Oh, okay, that's a good question. Any suggestions for what initial conversations to have, or questions to ask when you join a new team as a designer? I think you as a designer, you want to learn a little bit of the past, like how did you the solutions that are already implemented, how did you get there, the things that you tried and why the things that didn't work and the things that did work, so just so you know a little bit of that. But also, I think it's good to know like what are the goals of the company, what are they trying to accomplish, if it's a specific project, all the different things that you need to ask about that specific project. Whereas like, let me hold on. You want to ask like, what are you doing with this project? What is your target audience? I think it's not only for a project, but anything. It's just like what success looks like, and you not only for the project, but also you as a designer. What are your what are people expecting from you, and how you can contribute for the team? Because if they're just hiring you, probably they're expecting something very specific, or if it's not, then you can suggest the things that you can do, and you can help them and get the product to the right place. So I think let me see if there are any more questions. So yeah, I think talk. Anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much, guys. I think we went over 30 minutes, and I think it's just getting a little bit too crazy now. Thank you so much for joining me. Leave a comment if you want, and just subscribe to the channel. I do these live streams just like a little bit randomly, but I do have live streams every Sunday with a friend, which is called Ugur, and he's a great designer too. And we have like discussions, and we talk, and we get a little bit fights about design. So, and we do this every Sunday, so you should join us for that. And I also have different courses, so go to the playlist of this channel, and I have crash courses on Principle and Sketch and Flinto, and that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. Goodbye. And kisses. Bye bye.